One of the things that I'm going to be looking at is the kind of the rights and contractual issues surrounding the making and the exposition of work. But it struck me in relation to some of your questions and comments that one of the things that needs to be considered, not answered or solved, is the fact that the video work is being made by people who regard themselves not as filmmakers necessarily, but mainly as visual artists. And visual artists making video works or moving image works are kind of pushed towards a gallery institution type situation to say, this is my work. It's not film, entertainment, Star Wars, whatever, but it's an artwork. And in that context, you find yourselves with the work engaged with gallerists who are experienced in exposing work, finding collectors to buy the unique object. And you'll kind of get trapped in a mesh of what you were talking about, Erica, which was about saying, so far, galleries sell unique objects, so let's think about the edition of the unique object. Whereas in fact, what's happening is you're making a work that is to be seen, not to be owned as a unique object. And so the issue, it seems to me, is whether or not, as an artist, you have the vision, the intention, that the work that you make is a moving image, visual work to be seen, and therefore thinking about how that might be done for a period of time, ephemerally, one-off, streamed, or privately owned by a collector. It seems to me that collectors have a problem in the sense that they come to the idea of collecting work based upon that traditional model of the unique object. And so if a gallery dealer says, hello, you're used to collecting from me these unique objects which you've invested money in and sometimes you resell and sometimes you don't, here is a video work. Would you be interested in that? Look at it. It's about this. It takes a lot of imagination and skill for the gallery dealer to be able to say to the collector, actually, I want you to spend some money in buying something, and what you're buying is the right to show it and to see it, not the unique physical object. So there's an issue. I'm not saying I have a solution. There's an issue around what it is that you as an artist, speaking to artists, are wanting to convey and what the collector is wanting to have and what the dealer in the middle is trying to promote. And I don't think that's been resolved. And I think we're on the cutting edge of the developments, the like of which, Erica, you were talking about. Those are just some thoughts that I have based upon what you were saying. And you also mentioned, Erica, the broadcasting model. And it struck me when you said that when a musician creates a piece of music, usually and traditionally, it will be recorded, and then it's somehow thrown out into the world, made available to the world. There's no editioning. There is some, I know all that. But increasingly, we know that music gets put and made available to people for free now. A lot of people do that. A lot of original writers' music, make it available for free. I'm not saying it should be. But you see, when it's available, there are laws internationally that give musicians rights to be paid every time their music is broadcast or made available to the public. And there are systems that have been devised nationally and internationally for the collecting of some monies that then gets paid to the original composers. If we don't have anything like that for video work or film, there's no international licensing and controlling body. It's all down to the ownership of the rights in the film and some way of controlling its distribution and its being experienced, whether it's in a cinema or whether it's broadcast on the television. So in terms of broadcasting, which is the comment you made, Erica, you've probably thought about this more than me. I'm just speaking off the top of my head here. It seems to me that even broadcasting doesn't have an international police force like music does, and what they are, any more than film does. The big studios, the big distributors, control the access by the general public to seeing film and seeing television through contracts and the control by contracts of the rights they have. So I think there's lots of issues that need to be considered in a wider context than just the individual maker of the work and the gallery dealer and the museum or institution and stuff, some of which I can now talk to you about. When I was asked to prepare some material for this talk to you, in terms of the construction of artist legacies, legacies seem to me to require me to address the issue of posterity and therefore what will happen in the longer term to work. And my short and crude thesis in answering this question is to say, if there is to be a legacy, if there is to be a posterity, it requires the artist, the maker of the work, to make decisions right from the start. You need to make decisions at art school, if you go to art school, in the early stages of your young unknown career, in your middle career, and in your later career, about what will happen to the work that you've made. In my experience of dealing with artists and their estates, posterity never gets thought about until you reach middle age, or you're told you're dying of cancer or something, or of AIDS or something. And so at the early stage, like at art school, in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, most people don't give a damn about posterity. I was a young man once. I didn't think about posterity. But I began to think about it when I had children. I was thinking, well, what happens? How can I provide for them? Well, I'm not an artist. But many of the artists I know treat their works as if they were their children. And once you start to make a work that you find is an important expression of whatever you want to express, it seems to me that you need to think about not only when can I show it, who might see it, will I get recognition for it or not, but serious thoughts about, well, what will happen in the future? I'm reminded in this context of legacy of Duchamp. And we're all probably familiar with this work, but what's really important about starting with this is that you can see on the slide there that he worked on that piece for 20 years, 46 to 66. And he died in 68. And factually, we know that that work, étant donné, was never shown during his lifetime. Because he was, for 20 years, he was thinking about posterity. He was thinking about, will this work have a reception, a recognition, an understanding? Can I unfold it on the world? The answer was, he decided no. It cannot be, and it can only be shown after I'm dead and gone. And he made a specific provision in his will or last testament and instructions to his wife and her first husband as to where the pieces were and how to construct them and how to show them. And they did that within months of him dying, because he was thinking about posterity. And all that... Thanks, Caroline. Caroline is doing my thing. In 1957, Duchamp gave a talk about creativity. He was asked to talk about the creative act, and this is his opening statement. It's wonderful. So I'm taking this as my starting point for some of the things I'm talking about, in the sense that the great man himself was saying, it's no good just making the work. You need to think about how it's going to be experienced, not only for the immediate audience, but also for posterity later, who later becomes a posterity. The creativity happens, according to Duchamp, when the spectator engages with the work. Creativity is not about making the work, it's about the experience by the spectator of the work, according to Duchamp. And so it's important that, thank you, Carolina, she's doing all my changes. Okay, the artist considers what they really want to happen, what they want the spectator to experience, and when, and where, and how. Just like étant donné says, not during my lifetime. I want it to be the first element of my legacy, étant donné. He never saw the public reaction to it. We know it's one of the most influential works of art of the 20th century. We all know that now. And we all know that Duchamp was very influential. He didn't know it. He had no recognition, the like of which we know today. But he was thinking all the time, how can I make this work good, the best I can, and what about the future? Most artists, in my experience, do not do that until they move towards death. Okay. I don't know whether can you see that from the back? Can you see it? Okay. Is the work that you're making created as a primary artwork or, and Eric had touched on this, a secondary record of performance-related art? And that's a very important area that I find with my artist clients all the time. I want to make a video. Yeah, okay. Are you making a video as the work itself? Or actually, it's a video of my performance. So that, or someone else's performance, whatever. So you get into all sorts of issues about, is the video work a secondary document of an artwork? Or is the video the artwork itself? Okay. Is it intended, just slow down for a second, just take it back one. Is the work intended to be seen by a unique audience? Do you only want one person? If you take the parallel between the making of a traditional work, like a painting or a print or a sculpture, you say it's one thing. That's what collectors and the marketplace for art is mainly about. I'm spending a lot of money buying this because it's unique. It's unique because the artist decided it was unique. So what I'm saying is, the artist needs to think right at the very beginning of the conception of the work. When I've made this work, is it going to be unique or not? Okay. Or is my audience going to be limited in some way? How we achieve uniqueness and how we achieve the limitations, I will talk about if I've got time. So, is it a limited audience or is it an unlimited, undefined audience? Erica was talking about multiples, multiple versions of it. Make it available to the world. And that could be a way of you, in terms of your artistic intent, reaching as many people as possible. For example, it might not generate any income, but it might be something that you would like to achieve. Okay. And then, in terms of intentions, we've said intended to be seen by the uniqueness, intended, and that's the point that Erica was also talking about, the physical ownership, which is where you get trapped into the customs and practices of the conventional visual art world about objects being bought and sold and exhibited. And that's what collectors and dealers are all familiar with. So it's a very unusual thing for them to come to understanding whatever. So it needs to be decided by the artist. Physical ownership by collectors of the unique master. Do you want to create a work that is going to be made available as a unique master? That's it. I'm going to make the one work. A collector can come along, pay a lot of money for it, and that's it. They have got it. Or is it a limited edition, which is Erica's talked about, copies of the master, or unlimited edition of copies of the masters, or... Okay, just pausing there. It's in your hands, as speaking to the artist, it's in the artist's hands to say, what do I want to do? In my experience, most artists just make the work. And they go, well, I haven't thought about any of these things. And I'm not going to think about any of these things. I'm just going to make the work. Oh, by the way, somebody says, why don't you show it? Oh, well, I will. Somebody wants to buy it. Oh, is it a limited edition? I don't know what. It's very, very messy. And I'm not talking about the UK. I'm talking, my clients are international. I'm here to talk to you about the way things are beyond. All I'm suggesting is that from the artist's point of view, intentions should be clarified before you show the work, before you make it available to an audience. And intention should be clear before you transfer physical ownership. And you need to make plans for viewing. What plans do you have? How would you like it to be? You're in control. And or transferring physical ownership. There are legal matters to consider. And there are business considerations, some of which Erica was talking about. And there are obviously posterity considerations. The younger you are, the less of a damn you give about posterity. The older you are, more likely to be. But the more you consider posterity at this very early stage, the better your chances are of making good provision for posterity, for the future. Okay. So, some of the challenges, and I mentioned the international scale. Artists increasingly are coming to people like me going, you know what, I think I need legal and business help. I don't just want to make the work. I actually want legal and business help before I make the work, which I find really satisfying work. Well, hopefully I've got a case study at the end. So it's about the creation of it. It's about how you disseminate it, which is something, again, Erica is an expert on. How you communicate and get recognition for the work. Those are challenges for the artist. Then there's, for the public and private collectors, there are challenges for them, and there are challenges for curators and facilitators and producers of work. And there are challenges for people like me, saying, what the hell do we do now? Where do we go from here? What do we do? Because my service, my expertise is about meeting the needs of whoever my client is. A lot of artists, sometimes it's a collector, sometimes it's a gallery dealer, sometimes it's a museum and gallery institution. Sometimes it's Loop. Two main areas, intellectual property law and contract law. So let me do a whistle-top tour through. Okay, for those of you, you may know some of this, I don't know. But anyway, we have international and national intellectual property laws which recognize creative works of all kinds, and those laws categorize the works according to usually by their techniques or their forms. IP law, intellectual property laws, require works to be fixed, not ephemeral, fixed, in some fixed form. In terms of video art, if you're a maker of video art, are in the realm of what international intellectual property calls film. There's no separate category for video. There's no separate category for art. It's film. Sorry? I'm sorry? Carry on. I'll come to your point. It is film. There is a film category, and it includes sound in the film. But the category is film, okay? So film involves sounds and soundtrack, okay? But can we just go back, Carolina? I just want to stress that. So there are two things. There's copyright in film, which includes the soundtrack. That's one area. And there's the performer's rights in film. That's another area, because it may well be that the performer is not the filmmaker. Sometimes they are, sometimes not. So performers have rights, even if somebody else is filming them. Like, Daniel Craig has rights, even though he's not the author of da-da-da-da, whatever. There's performers' rights. There are, film copyright includes whistle-top through Carolina, sounds and soundtrack. And the important thing for those of you who don't know, and I'll remind you, those national and international laws automatically give authors the rights, the intellectual property rights. You don't need to apply to anybody to be a rights owner, to get copyright, to become the copyright. You simply make the work. If you make the work, international and national copyright law gives you the rights. To prevent, you've got the rights. What you've got the rights for? To prevent or to do it. Copying, public communication, leasing, altering or amending or changing the work. Somebody making work that they put your name on that you didn't make. And the author is the principal director, who is what you and I would call the filmmaker, or what I would call the artist. But just pausing there, the important thing about that is that as the maker, the author, the artist, you've got an automatic right to control all those things throughout the world. And that's an important consideration that you may want to make when making the work. Say, before I release it onto the world, I've just made this work. It's a film work under national and international laws. What am I going to do about copying, public communication, all that stuff? And how long do those rights last? At least 50 years in most countries in the world. There's an international deal that says at least 50, or it's 70 years throughout the European Economic Area and the USA and Singapore. So it's, just pause there, Caroline. So 70 years after death, if you're an artist, is a long, 50 or 70 years, is posterity. So when you make a work and you're 25 years of age, or I don't know how old Christian Marclay was when he made the clock, Erica, whatever he was. How old is he now? He's probably about 50, I would say 45, 50. So maybe the rights in the clock maybe would last for another 120 years if he lives to be 100. Do you see what I mean? So that's a hell of a lifetime for the work, never mind Christian Barclay, to think about, well, you know, is it going to be an icon of the 21st century? Is it an icon already? What can I do with it? I've got these rights to control how it's used, whatever. Has that been thought through? In Christian Marclay's case, you bet your sweet life it has. But not in everyone else's case. But who was Christian Marclay 20 years ago? Nobody had heard of him in the main. So when you have those rights, you can grant licenses to others to copy, to show, to lease, to disseminate, to distribute, which is something, again, that Erica was talking about. Okay. And also those rights can be transferred in your will or testament and say, when I die, the rights in my works will be managed by whoever. And as I said to you before, I have clients who are the estates of artists, filmmakers, and video art makers who are making, I can't name them, but I mean, Erica's mentioned some names, who were making works in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s, who died. And their family is going, Henry, what do we do now? What do we do now? And so we have a conversation about, you have got these rights. Unless the artist who died has given those rights away or contracted during their lifetime, and they go, well, we don't have any documentation. We don't, what can we do? Because the artist didn't do anything to keep an inventory of all the work they made during their lifetime and any documentation about who they've given rights to. That should be done from being 5 years of age or 25 years of age, because you're storing up trouble for your family, whoever it may be. Or if you don't have any family. I remember once saying to Francis Bacon, Francis, you must make a will. And he was saying, I don't give a damn, my dear boy. I don't give a damn. I don't have any children. Whatever. When I die, that's it. That's the end of it. And he didn't give a damn. Some don't. It depends on what the nature of the contract is, what licensing you've done. If you've given somebody during your lifetime the exclusive right to do blah, 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 you've given them the exclusive right, and that will last for the length of your rights, unless you've limited it. And so the family will be obliged to, deliver on that. So copyright protects audio-visual expressions, okay? And the most important thing I wanted to convey is, on this slide, is that intellectual property law does not protect ideas. A lot of people have a problem with that. Intellectual property law only protects what you have expressed. The shape, the form, the configuration, the movement, the sound, whatever is made, not the thinking behind it. So if you want to do, a Christian Marclay type telephone, the one that he does, the one, hello, 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 by doing clips or whatever, and doing something that kind of is like a Christian Marclay mashup, if you know what I'm talking about. You can do that as long as you don't make something that looks like a Christian Marclay work, or whatever it may be. So it's often what's called, in this territory, the idea-expression dichotomy. There's a dichotomy, there's a tension between, you have a great idea, what's the best way to keep a secret? What's the best way to keep a secret? Don't tell anyone. Exactly. What's the best way to protect an idea? Don't tell anyone. Because if somebody runs off with your idea and makes whatever your idea was, they become the intellectual property rights owner, not you. Okay? So the problem, the dilemma for artists is, you have a great idea and you manifest it in a piece of work, and you want the work to be seen by the world. Once they see the work, they can see the work and go, that's a great idea. And they can go running off with the idea and do something themselves, using the idea, not copying the work, but using the idea. That's the idea-expression dichotomy. Okay, let's move on, Caroline. And then we can move, looking at the time, we'll go through this quickly. So we've got now, quite separate from the author's rights, we've got the rights of performers. I just thought it was important to mention that. Just slow down there, Carolina. If you take it back one more. Okay. So, again, it's international and national. Performers now, not always did, but have rights, effectively, not to be recorded, not to be filmed, without their prior written consent. So if you're using people who are not yourself in your video works, you need to get their prior written consent. And when they do their prior written consent, you need to have a negotiation with them. If you've got Daniel Craig talking to Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, and they're saying, we think you're the next James Bond. And he's going, well, yeah, okay. And do you think he just says, yeah, you can film me? They have massive negotiations. What are they negotiating? Not only his fee for performing in the film, but how many films he's going to do, and what his expenses will be, and all that stuff, and what merchandising rights he has from the merchandising of the movie, and what rights he has for a share of the income from the DVDs, the Blu-rays, the streaming, the broadcasting, all that stuff. So the performer, yeah, it's great that she was selected to be the actress or actor, whatever you want to say, but she has the right to say, hang on a minute, you want me, so let's do a deal. So foresight by the producer, who is the author, or the principal director, together with the producer, and the performers. So, Carolina, let's just whip through this. Performance rights last for 50 years from the date of recording, so those rights are not like lifetime plus, it's just from a fixed period of time, usually 50 years. Just take it back. I just want to make another point. One more. Okay, that thing about, because there are 50 years worth of rights, remember, when we see on movies, we should see it on videos as well, video art. At the end of it, it goes copyright, whatever the year is, whatever the year of publication, first released. And the reason why it states that on the film credits, right, the very last thing you see is the year it was done. Because the rights in the film, not the author, the rights in that copy of the film last for 50 years from the year in which it was released. That's why it gets said in that. Okay, thanks, Caroline. So they use contracts. It's normal practice. I've mentioned that about doing deals. In this way, they carry on. I've said all this. Nature and contract and the recording itself, their fee, their share. And just pause there. If there are, I know, I can say this. One of my partners, I was talking to Erica before, he's doing work, one of my partners that we were talking about, is very interested in the fact that in working with performance artists. So he's doing work with Tino Segal, with Marina Abramovich, with Maria Rebo, and one of the issues that arises, particularly with Tino Segal, is whether or not the work is going to be recorded. In his case, it's not. In Abramovich's case, sometimes it is, sometimes not. In Rebo's case, sometimes it is, sometimes not. So that whole issue, that's a massive issue about ephemeral performances, then the artist or the performers need to decide whether or not there's going to be a recording. I mean, in Seagal's case, for example, we know that he does not allow it. And does he have a right to prevent it being recorded? Yes, he does, because of what I've said. The performer does not give permission. Okay, so there's Seagal, and there's just take it back one. I remember once being told, I don't know whether this is true, when Bob Dylan was on tour in the UK, maybe 30 years ago, when recording technology was getting to be really good, I was told that somebody on Dylan's behalf went to the guy on the mixing desk before they let the audience in and gave a brown envelope with thousands of dollars in it to the guy on the mixing desk to say, this is for you, we don't want any bootleg recordings to emerge. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But, I mean, it's pretty common practice to make sure, because all the guy on the mixing desk does, somebody else goes along and goes, I've got my little machine, can I just pay you a couple of $100 to plug in here? And they make a bootleg. And the guy on the mixing desk goes, yeah, and who else wants it? You know, whatever. So it was like thinking in advance. I don't want bootlegs. What am I going to do about it? Okay, next. And you do deals with the venues for invigilation. Okay, that's about forms. Okay, contracts. Let's just whip through some main elements. Intellectual property rights that I've just talked about can be transferred to others to own, so you can sell them. You can use them to grant licenses, which is what an element that Erica was talking about. You could also, and this is important, to decide whether you're going to allow the collector, or whoever it is, to have only the physical object. But what about, they don't want the physical object, they want the right to show it. So actually, you know, where is the market value? Is the market value in the right to show, or is it in the ownership of a unique physical object? Well, it's no good owning the unique physical object if you have no rights to show it. So what are you selling? So you can restrict what the collectors or the museums or the institutions get by your contracts. And you can create it as a source of income or capital. Income in terms of being paid royalties on a regular basis, on a stream basis. Okay? So ownership of the physical object can be transferred to others, copied, with or without rights to use. I've just made that point, Caroline. Let's go. Solves Caroline. Okay. There are limits to contracts, and this is international contract law. Only the parties to the contract, the artist and the primary buyer, there's the deal. What happens then? Well, the primary buyer, you said there isn't much call for a secondary market. Well, that's often because the first sale is so constrained with you can't allow things to be done. It's only enforceable by the parties to the contract, not by if the buyer sells it to somebody else. The contract cannot be enforced by the artist against that third person or fourth person or fifth person. That's a problem. So third parties. I'm just going to do this slide because I think it's really important. I've tried to construct some thoughts in this context about the first collector. The first collector. What does the first collector get for the primary sale? If they have a written contract, which they should have, it should say what audiovisual data has been acquired. What have they got? Have they got, what is the master? What have they got physically? Okay. But also, you would say as an artist, no copying. You cannot copy it by the contract. There is no copying. I own the rights. You have this physical object. I'm selling it to you. You cannot copy it. Next. But I will give you a license, a grant, to use it or to show it or to communicate it, but only in private, not in public. If you want to, you can do that, and I've done contracts in this way, where the private collector can only show the work in private, because that's what the artist wants. Next. And you get a capital payment. You say, okay, this is the market value. I'm selling it to you for this. Okay. And with, Eric has mentioned an authenticity certificate. Usually the authenticity certificate would say something like, this is an authentic work, blah, 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 blah. It's unique or it's a limited edition or whatever it is. No resale. I'm selling it to you, no resale. Or for resale. You can say that in your authenticity certificate. So in other words, the authenticity certificate could say no resale, which some do, in which case, unlike Lydiate, whose authenticity certificates say, yes, you can resell it, and this certificate must go with the work. Okay. So then you get notices embedded within the visual artwork to say that we're all familiar with these. Before you see the content, there's a warning. Hello, this is copyright protected. You would be violating this if you did blah, blah, blah. And then a copyright notice is the last credit. With a public collector, some thoughts, written contract. What? Similar thing. Just like before. Okay, carry on. The other way. Come down. That's it. Okay. Now, just take it back one. The difference there is an IP license granted to a public institution for public showing. That's very different to a private collector. For public showing at a public institution. And then a capital purchase payment. Authenticity of it. And usually with a public institution, not for resale. It goes into the archive and that's it. But you can show it publicly. Notices within the work. Next. Same. And then you can't see it there, but we're all familiar. just before you see the work, you want the thing to start, and it goes, it should say that, the work should say that, and then the work starts. But you need to put a warning up there. Say, this cannot, okay. And the other warning is the one at the end. There we are, copyright, blah, 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 blah. Okay, can you just whip through this? Go through, I'm not going to talk about that, I have no time. Just, Caroline, just keep pressing the button till we get to the end. Next one. What I wanted to say, this goes back to what I was improvising on. Okay, no, next one, film and television industry. What's important to consider, and Erica touched on this, is that the approach of the film and television industry is completely different to the approach of the video artist. And it's instructive to consider what their business and artistic model is compared with the artist. Here's the elements to consider. Legal and business, film and skills. Okay. The screenplay has a copyright. And then you have investors with confidential discussions. Then you establish a legal entity, a new legal entity that will be the owner of the film. And you would do one in each territory. You would say, we're going to make James Bond. We'll create a limited liability company for the UK, a limited liability company for the USA, a limited liability company for mainland China, limited liability, okay? So that those companies, which are wholly owned by Broccoli and Wilson, are the owners of the rights in those territories. And then you have production contracts for the investors who want a return on their investment. You have production contracts for the director, for the editorial control by the director, executive production and crew, post-production, distribution, and showing, and income sharing by all those people. Carry on. The economics of that scenario are that the primary release is theatrical, where they try to recoup their investment from box office sales. Remember, box office sales, they're not selling a unique object. They're showing it to people who buy tickets. The secondary market is the streaming, the downloading and all that stuff, and the Blu-ray and the DVD and all that. That's secondary. The primary way of getting your money back is from the box office. Okay, next. Then there's merchandising, which Eric talked about, as against the fine art world. In our system, what is it all about? That's what I started talking about. I started talking about at the very beginning, the ecosystem in the fine art world is showing in primarily fine art venues for free, not for tickets, and selling limited editions. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying it's a problem. Because the mindset is 1,000,000 miles or 1,000,000 kilometers away from the film industry. The film industry is about income for the millions of dollars that are needed to be recouped from the millions of dollars invested in production. So it's completely different. But you are occupying the same legal and business territory, which is film. The video artist is making film. And in terms of the law and business, you are competing with film. At the end of the day, you're not competing with painters, you're not competing with printmakers, you're competing with film. That's an important consideration. Okay. Case study. These two artists are British. They've been in partnership for 20 years. You can see there that they do performance-related works, they do live ephemera events, they do where there's no recording documentation, they do video artworks, for non-commercial, public-facing gallery showings. They do commercial gallery showings. They sell limited editions to private and public collectors. And before you go any further, Caroline, just say, I've been working with them for 20 years. Check out their website. It's really quite stunning. They came to see... next one, I think I've got... Okay, that was a live performance, which was a recreation of David Bowie's last gig. That was another one. It's just a still. And then this one, they came to see me about 5 years ago and said, we want to make a feature film. And I said, you're moving away from fine art? No, we're making a feature film as our artwork. But we don't know how to do it. We know how to make a film, but we don't know the legal and the business and all the... We don't know all that film industry stuff, which we know we need to do if we want to make a serious feature film. I said, why do you want to make because we want to make a serious feature film because our artistic practice has taken us to the point where that would be the right medium to do something that we thought of doing. Fine, okay, that's your choice. But I'm sorry, Ian and Jane, you're going to have to engage with the film industry. So we spent a long time, knowledge transfer, skills, advice, whatever. To cut a long story short, they spent 2 years making this film. 20,000 Days on Earth. It won the Best Directing Award at Sundance last year. Unbelievable. There they are, Ian and Jen on the left there, Nick Cave in the middle. And I said to them recently, I said, so now you're feature filmmakers. No. We're still artists. But it so happens that we now know how to make a feature film. That doesn't mean to say they will become Julian Snarble or Sam Taylor Wood or whatever making feature films. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But it was interesting how they have crossed over into that area. And the thing that I would encourage you to look at that film, because although it's a feature film and it had a similar release and all that stuff, and it's actually an artwork. It's a video artwork. That's all I've got to say.
Are there any comments, questions?
So, when you started your presentation, I started to think about, inspired by what you were saying, about the best way to show video art.
Yeah.
And then I thought, it's the cinema. And the best way to show a recorded sound piece by a musician is maybe not that actual piece, but the concert venue.
Yeah.
And that sort of inspired me just to think about those things. And you rarely see, at least, a video art piece in a cinema. The sound is better, the projection is better, the room is darker. And then, this isn't exactly a question, but on the other hand, you have these artists who redo a Bowie show, so what about the rights there? What about Bowie's rights? You must have been involved in that. So
yeah.
What about open source?
But you see, I could just say on that one,
yeah.
I'd just say that Bowie was consulted.
Okay.
And as we know,
right.
Bowie started out his life as an artist.
Yeah.
And he went, what can I do to help?
Right. But that's a problem, like the work, The Clock, that must have also accessed, I don't know how many films.
I know.
And so there's a question of material.
Yeah.
The material today and what we see and live in is, among other things, films and music and whatever.
Good thoughts. All I would say is that there have been major changes to intellectual property law that came into force throughout Europe last year, and they're not quite the same in the USA, North America, but in those highly developed technological countries like Western Europe. So where intellectual law has been changed to enable people to access digital files of sound, film, or still images, and to quote them, to mix them together. Because the legislators have recognized that everyone's doing it.
It's also like quoting a book if you write another book.
Yeah, and it's more that it's so like what Markley was doing was like, 10 years ago, I would have had a heart attack and said, oh my God, have you included anything that's any clips from Disney films because they'll kick your ass, that kind of thing. Whereas now, the world has changed. It's a good thought. That whole area. I mean, that's what Ian and Jane would well, one of the things, I know they don't mind me saying this, they said, one of the comments they made was, I said, how do you feel now about this? It's a 90-minute movie. And they said, you can say so much more in 90 minutes. And with sound. All that. And it's kind of, so we're just thinking about it. It's interesting.
Did you help Ian and Jane secure financing for this film?
No, personally, no, I didn't. But I know what happened was that I passed them on to a colleague who is an expert lawyer and business person in raising finance, and they did get loads of finance. As soon as they popped their idea, and they went, yeah, funding just came. It just, everyone went, wow, But I suppose from their point of view, they had done some work, I can say this as well without breaching confidence, with Nick Cave, doing short pieces of work with him to help him do videos of his music, little sort of MTV type things. And they had a dialogue with him. They got on with him really well. So when they had this idea of, hey, Nick, we want to make a feature film, which is about creativity, and we want you to be the main performer in it. Nick went, yeah, let's do it. And if you ever see the film, and I encourage you to do that, so it really is an important piece of work, is that Nick Cave in the film is playing a character that is Nick Cave. Do you see what I mean? Okay? It's really important, that. A lot of people don't realize that. And you see Sundance called it a documentary, okay? But actually, it's not a documentary. It's a fictional version of Nick Cave's life. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've got a really specific nerdy law question. For example, there's a work here, I can't remember the artist, but she's doing an a cappella version of some Smiths songs.
Right.
Technically, does she have to clear the rights to do that?
I think with music, it's very different. It's very different with music.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to say, because when I was saying because I also create music, so I'm not so down with that mash-up EU
No, I
law and everything. But what's interesting too is I get revenue, but you've just differentiated, which I've never really understood. I just got a letter from the Directors Guild, and they send me £20 occasionally.
All right.
Which is sort of interesting.
That's coming from PRS to the Directors Guild.
No, sorry, that's for directing. So when you were saying about rights on that, and the DAX stuff you can get as well.
Yeah.
And also back to repeat fees.
Yeah.
But I guess what you're saying is that's coming through the film.
Exactly.
Not from,
And
because I was just like, great, I've got a check.
That's
I didn't
something
really understand why.
to be considered. Yeah, absolutely. I think with the a cappella, on the a cappella, are you saying that this, I didn't see this, was a video made?
Yeah, well, for example, when Jeremy Deller did Do Ray, the old rave track, he had to specifically ask permission, and he did that version with Steel Band at Biennale. But here, she's just covering, I just quite often see on artists' films that they're using other music. There was another one in here where I said, what's that track? I quite like it. and it's obviously a song.
I
And
think,
they've not really.
if you
they just
include
sampled it.
music in a film, as against music itself being broadcast or streamed or whatever, where there is licensing of the broadcaster and of the venues and all that stuff for that, if you include it, just like classically, Tarantino, classically, we know, uses recorded sound music for his soundtrack. He has to get clearances for everything. So it's the same thing. Yeah. I think I've driven everyone away.
Henry, thank you very much.
Okay.